There are just a few tools that will be required to go through and put this assembly together. An alignment punch, a 3/8 ratchet, little extension, a couple different sizes of sockets, 1/2, 9/16, 11/16, and two different sizes of Allen wrenches, an open end wrench, a hammer, and of course the owner's manual. Once you have your sweep together, and in your basically just the frame and the body of the sweep, then you have your paddle chain in, and then you take and you bolt your weldment bracket to your gearbox of the existing auger, and then you go from there and you adjust the length of your sweep to what your bin is, and most obstructions are probably your ladders or steps or anything in there, but you want to go to adjust your sweep to the shortest distance so it does not hit anything as it makes a full revolution. But from there you go for adjustments. You do adjustments with these bolts here and all these holes, and from there we'll go and put the pin in. Sometimes there is some difficulty getting in. A lot of times you might have to use an alignment punch, but it's usually not so bad. With a little bit of persistence, you can get there. And once you have that together, then you can continue to go ahead and put the rest of this head section together. Put this sprocket on and turn that, and of course every set screw gets tightened. Then we take this section, pivot joint assembly, and sometimes it's nice to have an extra hand, so I brought in Bill here to give a hand on this. Yep. There's a sprocket that goes on this back side. Make sure you have your key in there while you put that on. And this chain that couples those together, what I do is usually leave a little gap here so the shaft is not sticking through. And I tighten this set screw up along with these, and then I leave this chain off currently, so that way when you go get everything assembled and back together, you have a little bit of ease of turning these shafts to tighten all the set screws, set your collars, get all that stuff ready, and put this chain on last. From there we'll put on a set collar, and usually I'll tap them to the right, just tap them with a punch and a hammer, then I tighten the set screw, and from there we'll go and put a sprocket on, and once we have that on, we'll put this top sprocket on, which already has the collar on. And I leave those set screws loose first, and I go back and on this shaft I put this set collar on, and do the same as what I did on the previous ones. Hammer and a punch, tighten them up just a little bit, and tighten your set screw. And then I go and put this sprocket on. This outside chain is rather simple. It's all out in the open. And I make it so it comes down out of the way. And another reason why I leave those sprockets loose is so I can put the connector link in and have a little bit more freedom with it. And I usually come from the back side feeding it through so I can do everything on this front side as far as the harder stuff is putting the pins in and getting them bent over so they're locked in place. This top chain, I feed from this top down. It makes it rather simple. I feed over the top just a little bit, and I grab that one. Possibly can. There we go. And come around. And I leave that out. There we go. And I go through and tighten these chains up just a little bit so we can align these sprockets. You have to leave them far enough away so your chain does not hit your bolts inside there. At this point, we're going to take a straight edge and set all these collars, these sprockets and collars, so everything is in line. And if you don't have a straight edge, use something that you can find probably in your shop or anything that would be somewhat straight, or try and do your best at eyeballing your chain. I recommend using a straight edge though. And once you have that, we can continue and go forward and tighten set screws on these collars and sprockets. Once we have all the set screws tightened, we'll go back through and come back around, and we're going to put this chain on and couple that to our gearbox on our machine. When we go back through and we're to the point where we can tighten these chains up, and you about want a width of your finger for slack in your chain. And if you get that to that point, go ahead and tighten this down, and you have that chain ready to go. We'll move up to this chain and we'll do the same with that. And you want that finger width slack in that chain. That's a hair tight, so we'll back that off just a hair. And we'll put the locking nut in, and it is back in there a little ways. You might have to turn your wrench and get in there and tighten that up to lock that in place. After everything is tightened, the next step would be to start with putting the shields on, the safety shields. These go inside. There's also 4 bolts in that. And then there's one last shield that goes up on the top. It's just a little cover shield. And there's also 4 bolts in that. Once we have all the bolts started, we'll go through and tighten everything up on those bolts, and that will consist of the head section. Next, we're going to continue with the drive assembly unit. With this, we'll have the gearbox out of the box, and we need to take this set screw out of this gearbox. and replace it with a vent. And that takes a 9/16 socket or wrench, either or. Tighten that down, and that will be the top of your, be at the top of the gearbox. In relation with this small shaft, you would like to install this vent on the left-hand side at the top of it. You can remove these covers. They will have the keyways in them already. You'll want to use this shield bracket. Put this in, insert it in there, the gearbox. And just start all your bolts. Do not tighten any until you have all of them in there. There's 2 on the top, and there are 4 on the bottom. Those are 3/8 bolts, and they consist of a 9/16 wrench or socket. Tighten all 6 of those down. After tightening the bolts on this weldment bracket for the gearbox, you can go ahead and continue by putting sprockets on your gearbox. This is how the sprocket orientation is on the gearbox, this direction. And you can tighten your set screws onto that sprocket. And you can continue by putting the wheel hub onto the other shaft of the gearbox. And I leave enough room so you can get in there to tighten that set screw. From there, we need to go and put this sprocket onto our drive section of the sweep. Go ahead and tighten your set screws on that, onto that. Now, if you wish, it'd be nice if a guy had an extra hand to put this assembly onto the unit itself. After getting the gearbox and this assembly bolted on, we do not tighten those bolts yet. We put this sprocket onto the drive section shaft, and we align those with a straight edge and tighten set screws down. Then we continue with putting the chain on, and you have to roll that chain back up through there far enough so you can get in here and grab a hold of the bottom side of it, and then you are able to pull it around. And then you put your connector. You might have to pull this back, which allows you to get up here, put your connector link in. Then from there, finish that connector link up. From there you can tighten this up. Remember having about a width of a finger slack in your chain, and then you are ready to tighten these 4 bolts, 2 on top, 2 on bottom, and that'll keep this all tight. Your gearbox is in place. From there, you can put your wheel assembly on, which is rather simple. Four nuts. From there, you can tighten those up once you have those 4 all on. That is complete. And you have a shield to put on to cover your chain up. Three bolts from the inside, nuts on the outside. That way there is no interference with the paddles on your chain. Tighten those three up, and that is the end of your end section or drive section.